We're coming up to the start of the 2022 MLS season, and one of my favorite things to do is predictions. I did this last year, and for my second year creating content in this league, I'm going to do it again. Here are my 2022 MLS predictions for each team in the league. Now, Mr. Garber just keeps the teams coming, so every year this is more and more I gotta cover. This season we'll have 28 teams competing for MLS Cup. So keep in mind, with 28 teams, there's absolutely no way we're gonna have the same table. There's absolutely no way I'm gonna get every position correct. Well, possibly. So in short, don't get too upset with what I say. For every team, there's gonna be someone who doesn't agree with me, and that's 100% okay. Also, with MLS being all about parity, we'll see teams bounce around every year. This isn't like in England where you can expect the same 5 teams to finish top 5 every season. MLS is crazy. You have the league champions finish in 9th place in their title defense, and that's what makes this hard. That's what makes it so unpredictable, and that's why it's fun to predict. I'm writing this video before any other places have put out their preseason predictions, so just know all of these ideas are mine and mine only. I have no clue what the media thinks, so I could look like a fool, but just know that these are genuine takes. So let me know what your takes are down below, and buckle up. This is going to be a long one, and let's get into it. We're starting off the Eastern Conference where we have 14 teams, and at the bottom of those 14, I'm going to be putting FC Cincinnati. Last year, I thought this team was on the up. I didn't put them too high, but I didn't have them rock bottom. I gave them hope, and they took it, man. Killed it. 3 years into the league, 3 wooden spoons, and now I just don't know what to do with these guys. I will say I'm not confident in this pick. I think Cincinnati is starting to get things right. I just can't back them anymore. Over the offseason, they've started a transformation into some kind of Philadelphia Union from what it looks like. And if they can become anything close to that, I think they're going to be on the right path. They brought in Union's Chris Albright as the GM, and they also got the Union's assistant coach, Pat Noonan, in for his first head coach gig. Cincinnati is known for their atrocious defense and lackluster attack. In 2021, they had the most goals conceded with 74 in 34 games, which averages to just above 2 goals a game. They've patched up some of those holes with a big signing from the Ecuadorian League in Gustavo Valencia, and maybe most importantly, signing goalkeeper Alec Kahn from Atlanta United. Up top, the $13 million Brenner had 8 goals in 33 games, and if Cincy is going to get anywhere this year, they're going to need their 22-year-old DP to raise that tally significantly, especially if they plan on conceding as much as they did in the last 3 years. Next up is expansion team time. I have Charlotte FC sitting in 13th place, and I think they're taking a page out of NYCFC's book from last year. Just like Ronnie Dylan in the 2021 preseason publicly announcing doubts in his team, Charlotte's head coach is doing the same with the iconic "we're screwed" quote popping all around social media. Unfortunately for Charlotte though, I don't think this year will end up in them raising the MLS Cup like it did for New York. But why is Angel Ramirez saying this about his team? Well, Charlotte's very focused on foreign talent to build their roster. They've been very transparent that they want to build a team base from all around the globe with an emphasis on the attack. So what's the problem? Well, most of Charlotte's potential signings have fallen through. They were on the brink of signing a $6 million DP winger from Spain, but at the last minute that transfer couldn't be completed due to legal complications. They also had a deal agreed with a Polish winger from Derby County, but he injured his ankle shortly after, and then the deal was dead. They did manage to bring in DP Karol Swiderski from the Greek Super League, but right now he's going to have a lot of pressure on him to be the lifeline of this attack. Now, historically, expansion sides don't excel in their first year unless you're LAFC or Atlanta, so I don't think expectations should be too high for Charlotte's maiden campaign. With all their ongoing issues, I wouldn't be surprised to see them finishing bottom of the league, but right now I have them in 13th. Going up to 12th, I'm putting in DC United, and this one may be a surprise for some people. Last year, DC only missed out on the playoffs by 1 point, and they were tied 3rd for most goals scored. For a team who didn't even make the playoffs, that's an impressive stat, but I think they were overperforming. With the most penalties awarded with 11 and the lowest number of passes throughout the whole league, I think DC were lucky to be fighting at such a high standard. Also, I'm not convinced this playstyle is going to be sustainable for another year. Last season, we saw DC lose a significant number of guys through injury, and in year 2 of this tactic, it can either go one of 2 ways. Either the players understand the tactics better and can better use their energy to be more effective, or the guys remain being sidelined and the overall high intensity slowly dies off. Now, the transfer market won't be finished by the time this video goes up, but DCF teased the idea of being open to trades for top goal scorer Ola Kamara. If that happens, DC already has replacements lined up in Michael Estrada on loan from Toluca and new DP in Taxi Fontes from Rapid Vienna in Austria, but he won't be arriving until the summer. Big departures from this team include youngster Kevin Paredes to Wolfsburg for $7 million and the huge interleague sale of Paul Arriola to FC Dallas. With losing some massive players, will DC stars be able to jump right into Losada's unique playstyle? And honestly, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. In 11th, I'm predicting the Chicago Fire. Now, Chicago has undergone maybe one of the most intriguing transformations over this past offseason. You may remember before the final game of the 2021 season, Chicago reportedly told a good number of players that their contracts wouldn't be renewed. This led to most of those players not featuring in the club's final game of the regular season. After everything was done and dusted, Chicago declined the options on 9 players, which included striker Robert Beric, DP Alvaro Madron, and Lukas Jonovic. All 3 of those players were in the top 4 goal scorers during the 2021 season. Now, to help replace those guys, and I'd even say improve on some of those guys, Chicago has gone all out. They brought in the Union's 2021 top scorer, Kasper Schmeichel, who managed 12 goals and 4 assists last year. The Fire also paid around $500K for a center back from the German Bundesliga. And finally, the biggest one yet, Xherdan Shaqiri signed for Chicago in an $8 million move from Lyon in the French league. Obviously, this Shaqiri move is a real hitter. With experience from Bayern, Liverpool, Lyon, Shaqiri has the potential to be one of the best players to ever wear the Chicago shirt. If he can remain healthy, I'd expect him to easily pass a combined 15 goals and assists for this team. With their new owner Mansueto opening up his checkbook and the hiring of first-time head coach Ezra Hendrickson, this could be the beginning of a new era in Chicago and get them closer to where they should be on a competitive level, being one of the biggest markets in the league. Headed into 10th place, I'm putting in CF Montreal. Last year, most people predicted Montreal to hold up the Eastern Conference, but they were surprisingly impressive under first-year head coach Wilfried Nancy. They ultimately missed out on the playoffs, but I was impressed by their performance. Coming into 2022, they haven't lost any key guys, and they've added some decent players. First one that comes to mind here is former Nashville right back and Canadian international Alistair Johnson, who was traded for $1 million in GAM. But with no DPs other than Wanyama, I still don't know if this team will be headed to the postseason. Last year, Montreal was relatively defensively sound, and interestingly, they had the 4th highest passes in the league, which shows to Wilfried Nancy's pleasuring style. They still boast Georgi Mihalovic, who finished 2nd in assists throughout the league last year with 16. I think to compete at the highest level, they are still missing a true center forward to depend on, with their highest scorer only having 8 goals last year. It's also important to note that, at least at the beginning of the year, Montreal will be competing in the CCL, which could lead to some fixture congestion. The New York Red Bulls are coming off the 12th straight year in the postseason, but they were pretty close to missing out last year, and with other teams continuing to improve, I'm not sure if the Red Bulls will have what it takes to make it in again. Last year, New York only put away 39 goals, which was the least for any playoff team. Leading scorer and the only DP on the Red Bulls books, Patrick Kamala, had only 8 goals. Now, that was his first year in the league, so he may be more comfortable this time around, but I'm not too sure if he will be able to provide enough. To help the attack, the Red Bulls made one massive move, bringing in Inter Miami's Lewis Morgan for $1.2 million in allocation money. Although Morgan's got the potential, we haven't really seen much in his 2 previous years in the league. Gerard Struber has done well bringing back a bit more of the classic Red Bull football into this team, but last year the team led in the lowest number of passes and the worst pass accuracy. But with new signing of Luquinios for over $3 million, that should improve, even if he hasn't had the best of the most recent years at Legia Warsaw. The team does have a solid defense though, and they managed to keep Carlos Cornell, but they did lose a few pieces of their back line with Andrew Gutman and Kyle Duncan exiting. Another interesting note is that for the 3rd time in the past 5 years, the Red Bulls have got rid of their captain, this time in Sean Davis. So keep an eye out who gets the armband this year, because maybe it'll be a sign that they're the next one out the door. Anyways, I got the Red Bulls in 9th place. Next up, I got Inter Miami in 8th. Now, this team is a tough one to predict here, and that's because we're going to see an almost entirely new lineup than we've seen the past 2 years. Former Seattle Sounders technical director Chris Henderson has had an insane amount of work to do following Miami's embarrassing and illegal roster building from 2020. This offseason, Miami has recorded like 21 departures from their team. Blaise Matuidi is out, Rodolfo Pizarro's loaned back to Mexico, Figal's off to Argentina, Perez is off to River Plate, and honestly, as I said, there's so much more out the door. Coming in, we're seeing a lot of young talent. 21-year-old right mid Emerson Rodriguez is one of the most expensive transfers coming in from the Colombian league. They also signed midfielder Jean Mota, who is bringing over 200 games of experience from Santos in Brazil. The last one I'll cover is DeAndre Yedlin's return to MLS from his stint in England and Turkey. This squad is totally revamped, and now it really all depends on how quickly Phil Neville is able to get them on the right page and how well his game plan works. Miami tallied in last place in the league for total scoring attempts in 2021, so this team will need to figure out a better game plan in the final third. Miami struggled over the past 2 years, but maybe the page is turning in Florida. I still don't have them in the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck in, possibly. In 7th place, I'm putting in the Columbus Crew. Now, since their 2020 MLS Cup win, this club has had all the hype but nothing to show for it. They were supposed to be one of the deepest MLS teams last year, but an immense amount of injuries and just poor performances led this team to a 9th place finish in the disappointing title defense campaign. The positive for Columbus is that they still have the core of their players who took them to MLS Cup in 2020. They still have Lucas Elorrion, Nagbe is still performing at a high level, Eloy Room has re-signed, and now they have an emerging forward in Miguel Berry to cover up for Zardes if he's needed. They've also added a new center back from Red Star Belgrade in Milos Degenek, and have signed Ghanaian winger from the Polish league in Yaw for $2 million. Like I mentioned, they haven't really lost any of their big talent other than left back Valenzuela, who has struggled with injury problems since joining the Crew in 2018. I think this team has a ceiling way above their finish in 2021, but it's always hard to back a team to finish really high after a disappointing year. The Crew still look like they're a bit hesitant in the attack and would rather move the ball around aimlessly instead of going towards the net. I do think this Crew team will be able to get back into the playoffs, but I'm not entirely sure that they'll be as dominant as people once believed. Last year, I was really high on Orlando, and they had spells where they were unbeatable in this league, but after some rough runs of form, they ended up sitting in 5th. This is a team who 3 years ago never made a playoff appearance, but now honestly I can't see them failing to make the postseason. They do have some holes that are going to need to be filled this season though. Nani has departed the club after what I would call a somewhat successful time in MLS. Nani finished top goal scorer for the team 2 out of the 3 years he was in the club, and he consistently was in the top 3 assists over those years as well. Basically, what I'm saying is that him leaving Orlando, the team's lost a key contributor in the attack. Along with Nani out the door, Daryl Dike has also left for $10 million. I also think it's noteworthy to mention that Chris Mueller has left for Scotland on a free transfer. So the question for Orlando is, will the replacements be able to fill the boots of those who are gone? They've spent big on Facundo Torres, a winger coming out of Uruguay, and they'll be hoping that Erkin Carr from Austria Vienna will be a good replacement up top. They also have Alexandre Pato coming back from injury. The good thing is that the defense will still be on lockdown like last year with Pedro Gallese in goal and Antonio Carlos in the back line. This team is putting a lot of pressure on their new signings coming in, but I think they'll perform enough to get the Lions in the playoff positions again. Coming up next is a team who could either be cup contenders or not even make the playoffs. Toronto were probably the most disappointing club coming out of 2021. For a team who was tipped to be in the higher places of the East last year, Toronto finished in 13th with only 6 wins. Coming in this year is former LAFC head coach Bob Bradley, and he's had quite the task of rebuilding the squad for a return to their Eastern Conference dominance we saw a few years ago. Of course, the big news for Toronto this offseason was the acquisition of Lorenzo Insigne from Napoli. The 30-year-old Euro 2020 champion will join the team in the summer, and when he joins, he's going to be the focal point of this squad. There are 2 other key details I got for Toronto. One, they had the 2nd most goals conceded last season. To help with that, they've basically swapped their underwhelming DP Soteldo for Salcedo, a Mexican center back coming from Tigres. This signing should clear up some of those defensive issues. My second point is on their attack. Last year, Toronto didn't have any player that scored more than 4 goals. They've got rid of Josie Altidore and re-signed youngster Ayo Akinola, but he's been dealing with tons of injury problems as of late. They brought in Spanish striker Jesus Jimenez from the Polish league to help on that side of the game, and hopefully for them, he'll fit right into the MLS play. Again, I'm putting Toronto in 5th place right now, but I could see this team either above the playoff line or below it. But with the signing of Insigne, I think that if they fail to make the playoffs, it would be a failure for his first year. Now we're in the top 4 of the East, and this is where we start to get into the highest level of teams where it's harder to predict who will finish where. For Philadelphia, their 2 previous seasons have been very successful. In 2020, they won the Supporters' Shield, and even after selling 2 of their top players, they've managed to maintain their level and finish 2nd in 2021. This year, they've done some tinkering to hopefully make the final jump to MLS Cup. Although Kasper Schmeichel was their top goal scorer last season, the trade involving him to Chicago could be the perfect move for the Union. For some parts of last year and in their CCL run, they were missing a truly clinical goal scorer. This offseason, they've brought in Julian Carranza from Miami as a DP, and another DP striker from the Danish top flight in Michael Uri. Carranza hasn't done too much in the league since joining Miami for $6 million, but maybe he can find his feet under Jim Curtin. For Uri, he's coming in for a club record transfer of $3 million and has 11 goals in his 16 appearances in the Danish league. In the past few days, the Union have also traded out their third DP, Jamiro Montero, to San Jose, so we'll have to see what their plans are for that number 10 position. This club has consistently shown that their development, next man up mentality can be successful in this league, and although I'm predicting them to take a step back, I only think that's because other teams around them are improving. Every year there's always a big unexpected turn that happens, so that's my reasoning behind me putting the record-setting Revolution team of 2021 down to third place. I think it's an easy call to pick them to fight for the Supporters' Shield again, but we rarely see teams earn that achievement multiple years in a row. Other than sending Tajon Buchanan to Europe though, this team is really the exact same from last season, with some starting 11 calibers being added as well. Sebastian Lletget is joining the team, as well as Josie Altidore in a backup number 9 position, which I think could be a game changer off the bench. We saw the Revs go through their whole depth chart last year and still pull off 3 points in tight matches. Now I haven't really paid too much attention to preseason games, but I did see the Revs lose 4-0 to the Galaxy recently, but let's just hope that was a fluke. New England's DP game is also one of the best trios in the league, with Boo, Buxa, and Heel combining for 35 goals and 31 assists last season. To be honest, I think a slightly lower position in the league could be beneficial for the Revs to kickstart their postseason aspirations and avoid any extended bye past the first round. When a team wins the Shield, unfortunately, that means there's no cup, so be happy you're in third New England. It's tight up at the top of the East, but in second place I'm putting in MLS Cup champions NYCFC. In my predictions last year, I had New York outside of the playoffs. About halfway through the regular season and towards the final weeks, I could tell that this team wasn't to be messed with. Flying into the playoffs, NYCFC were, in my opinion, the most dangerous team and had them reaching the final from the start of the playoffs. One of the key reasons for that championship push was no other than Golden Boot winner Tati Castellanos, and kind of surprisingly, Castellanos hasn't been sold yet and is probably going to be staying at least for the first half of the year. Now, if Tati gets sold either before the summer or in the summer, NYCFC are going to have to really invest in a sufficient replacement. If they do so, I think they could be contending for the number 1 seed in the East, but if they can, I fear that this city side could fall deeper than just second. Tati topped the team with 19 goals last season, and the closest after him was Jesus Medina with 9. Over the offseason, Medina has departed the club, along with their third top goal scorer, Tijori Shradi, so this leaves me with some questions for the Blues attacks, though Talis Magno and Thiago Andrade are now with another year of MLS experience. On the defensive side, I think they'll be fine. Even though they've sent James Sands to Rangers, they have one of the best defenses last year, and with Sean Johnson still on his game, and the introduction of new DP center back Thiago Martins, this team should be safe in the back. And finally, to be honest, I have no clue where to put Atlanta United. This was one of the most entertaining attacking teams in the league in 2018 and 2019, but since then they've lost their touch. With some interesting managers coming in and out, I think Atlanta have finally found somewhere where they can build on under Gonzalo Pineda. With Joseph Martinez fully returning from his ACL injury in 2020, I really can't put out an expectation on where he can take this team. He may be a little slower like last year, or he could be back to his 30 goals a season form he achieved in 2018. Aside from Martinez, this team is spending money like they're in Europe. This offseason, they've unloaded some of their failed projects and invested $16 million in attacking midfielder Thiago Almada from Argentina. Along with that, they still have Luis Araujo that they bought from Lille for $12 million last season. I also look at their pieces they already have like Santiago Sosa and Miles Robinson, and I think this team has the potential to really find their form in 2022. I get that this is a very out there call and it may not be realistic to expect these new additions to gel right away, but I'd definitely be scared to play Atlanta when it comes down to it. This league is all about teams bouncing up and down the table year after year, so why not have Atlanta finish first place in the East? As we move over to the West, we have another 14 teams that we have to look at. We're starting in 14th place, where I have the San Jose Earthquakes. Now, San Jose is a team that seems to be confused on what they want, and if the team doesn't know their identity well, how am I supposed to know what they'll do this year? Right now, they're riding with Matias Almeida as head coach, and let's just say his man-marking tactics are a bit interesting, and they haven't really worked well since he's come to the team. With that, he's built a team full of players that he handpicked for this tactic, and the issue is this tactic is not working. Almeida has also reportedly thrown out some quotes that shine some bad light on his position with the front office and his situation, and it seems like this will be Almeida's last year in charge. The Quakes have done some interleague trading, picking up Calvo from the Fire, Jan Gregus from Minnesota, and the biggest one yet, Jamiro Montero from Philadelphia Union. I think Gregus and Montero will be able to work in this system very well, and midfielders who are familiar with the league usually perform decent. The Quakes also have kept hold of Trophies, who had moments last year netting 12 goals, and they also have young Cade Cowell with another full season of experience under his belt. In Austin FC's second year in the league, I'm not expecting that big of a jump for them. It's definitely tough when almost every team in the league is starting to put some really heavy investing into their clubs. Last year, Austin, as well with the other 3 Texan teams, finished in the last 3 places in the West. This year, all teams have gone out and signed multi-million-dollar acquisitions. Head coach Josh Wolf is set in his playstyle, playing energetic attacking football, but in order to pull that off, you need a team that can work well together easily with or without the ball. In Austin's first year, they weren't that team. Although they had some intriguing build-ups, Austin finished with the least amount of goals scored out of all 27 teams. Along with their attacking troubles, this team conceded a ton too and faced the most shots out of all 27 teams. Without Stuver pulling off some incredible saves, this team could have easily finished dead last. Not like they were far from it anyways. DP Pochettino is out to River Plate after an unimpressive season, and the attack looked better after Drusi came in mid-season from Russia in 2021. The biggest pieces Austin added so far in the offseason include Valencia, a defensive mid with over 100 appearances in the Colombian League, and they've brought in 2 center backs in draft pick Kip Keller and Gabrielson from Toulouse in France. I still think this team will struggle defensively unless another big solution comes in, but I do think their attack will straighten itself out with the inclusion of players and the experience they picked up last season. Still though, I have them in 13th. Now you would have thought I would have learned my lesson after last year, picking RSL to finish dead last, and then they went on to make the playoffs and push all the way through to the conference finals, and you'd think I'd have them higher this year, right? Well, technically they are a little higher, but it's only 2 spots higher. Even though this team showed the fight last year, I'm not convinced that they have what it takes to hold up for an entire campaign. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, almost every team this year is investing heavily into their roster. And the reason I said almost is because of teams like RSL. They've got a new owner now, thank goodness for them, but we haven't really seen any real movement this offseason. And the real movement we did see was one of their star DPs, Albert Rusnak, heading over to title contender Seattle Sounders. So yeah, there's not too much for me to get excited about in Utah. They still have Damir Kreilach, which is vital for this team, but I don't know if him alone will be enough in their DP ranks. After the playoffs, I was impressed with Anderson Julio, so I do see him making a bigger impact this year, and I also think Rubio Rubin may be able to improve his 8 goals last year. Also, just because I want to throw out his name, David Ochoa. I won't say anything about him, but just know David Ochoa. Again, in 11th, I have another team who finished super low last year and are now beginning a new era under new owner Ted Siegel, new GM Pat Onstad, and new head coach Paulo Nagamura. Finishing bottom of the West in 2020 and then in 2021, the Houston Dynamo are ready to do whatever it takes to get away from winning that title for the 3rd year in a row. Last year, Houston was up there in the lowest number of goals in the league. To fix this, they've broken their transfer record and signed Sebastian Ferreira from the Paraguayan League for over $4 million. As well as the addition in their attack, the Dynamo were able to pick up a starting goalkeeper from the Portland Timbers last year, Steve Clark, after his contract option was declined by the Timbers. Those are 2 huge acquisitions in 2 areas of need for this team. Houston also went out and spent $1.5 million on a DP center back from the Turkish league. So with the checkbooks finally open in Houston, I think we can expect the product on the field to improve as well. But to me, they're not a playoff team just yet. In 10th, I have the Vancouver Whitecaps, and I know that last year the Whitecaps had a season that I think they are going to be proud of, but I'm envisioning a step back in 2022. The reason is because I think they overperformed last year, especially towards the end of the year, which shot them up in the playoff position. New signing Brian White took the league by storm after he joined Vancouver, and although he's a very exciting prospect for this team, the Whitecaps had one of the least amount of scoring attempts last year. They had the lowest number of scoring attempts on target too. So when I look at that and I see that they had 2 attackers with 10 plus goals, I just find it hard to justify that they will be able to keep that up. But I still do rate the partnership of White and Caicedo up top, and I think that they deserve that spot over DP Cavallini. Another reason I see a step back for this Vancouver team this year is because of the loss of one of the best keepers in the league, Maxime Crépeau. in 2021, Vancouver were one of the top 10 teams that faced the most shots, and Crépeau managed to maintain one of the best save percentages in the league of just above 75%. With him out the door and what seems to be no proven replacement coming in, this could be a tough year for the Whitecaps. In 9th position, I'm going to be going with FC Dallas. This is a team coming off an 11th place finish last year and ended up with the 3rd most goals conceded. I think the biggest story coming into this year for Dallas is their investment into their squad for the first time in what seems like forever. After selling multiple names overseas, which includes $20 million they received from the selling of Ricardo Pepi, FC Dallas have gone out and broke their transfer record with a $7 million purchase of a very well-regarded 19-year-old winger from Argentina. They've also gone out and smashed the interleague trade record and picked up Paul Arriola from DC United for $2 million in allocation money. One of the most odd pieces of business, though, was the trade involving Hollingshead to LAFC for Farfan. Hollingshead has been one of the staples in this team since 2014, and it doesn't seem like they got the best of the deal in this trade. FC Dallas will be under new head coach Nico Estevez, who has experience working with young talents, which will fit perfectly in this Dallas system. Looking at Dallas's DP situation, they've upgraded homegrown Jesus Ferreira into a DP role and still have Franco Jara under the contract, which I don't know if he's worth that, even though he had a better year last time with 7 goals and 2 assists in 2021. Okay, now before everyone freaks out, let me explain this. As I mentioned during my Eastern Conference coverage, every year there is some team that drastically underperforms or overperforms. Teams flop all around the table like a fish out of water, so maybe to help catch one of those fish, I gotta throw in some out-of-pocket predictions in there, and this is it. With Nashville joining the West and other teams, in my opinion, getting better, it's pushed Colorado out of the playoffs. I kept moving around these teams, and the more and more I moved them, Colorado just dropped further and further. I get it, they were top of the West last year, but I don't think they've improved over the offseason, and I actually think they've gotten worse. Now, keep in mind, at the time of recording this, there are 0 designated players on this roster. They've declined the option of their 1 DP last year, Louis Nomley, which I think is rightfully fair. Colorado have said that they're looking to add in the attacking department, but so far I haven't seen anything. They have brought in Brian Acosta from Dallas, which is a good pickup in the midfield, but they've also lost Kellen Acosta to a conference rival. Colorado has also sold Austin Trusty to Arsenal in the summer, so there goes another one of their best talents. I know I got some Rapids fans watching right now, but I'm sorry, I gotta do what I gotta do. In the Western Conference playoff spots, coming in 7th is LA Galaxy. Last year, this was the only team in the West that I got spot on in their placement, so we'll be looking to do that again this year. In the very early part of 2021 season, the Galaxy looked like they were going to take the league by storm, but eventually reality set in for them. They ended up missing out on the playoffs in the final game of the regular season in a dramatic fashion. But I like where this club is headed. I think Greg Vanney will be able to return LA to the promised land of the postseason for the first time since 2019. Chicharito has found his form in MLS, and last year he tallied 17 goals in the season where he was injured for a good chunk. If he stayed healthy the whole year, I bet he could have probably won the Golden Boot. The issue though is that other than Chicharito, the Galaxy had nowhere else to get goals from, with the next highest scorer, Kevin Cabral, only having 5 to his name. But like David Goss of MLS's Extra Time would say, you have to give foreign players an excuse in their first season in the league. So with this theorem, I'm expecting Cabral to really show up this year, and he's already off to a good start in preseason. Along with Cabral, the club brought in Douglas Costa on loan, which could either be good or be a complete waste of time. If the attack can support Chicharito's numbers, this could be a great season for LA. In 6th place, I'm putting in Minnesota United. A year ago, this team was supposed to challenge for the top of the West, and then came out 0-4 in their first 4 games. Since then, it's been a sense of adding the correct pieces and trying to recover the distance they lost in the first part of the year. After investing heavily into their attack with Roman Abila, who left the team shortly after joining, DP Adrian Unu from Stade Rennais, and Fragopane from Argentina, this team still finished with one of the lowest goal tallies, and Robin Lod as their top scorer with 9. Their key playmaker Reynoso finished 2nd in the league for key passes, but there seems to be a disconnect between that and actually putting the ball in the net. The fate of this team in 2022 relies on if Unu can take his experience from the last year and come to fruition this time around. I think you can count on the chances being there, they just need to start converting, and because of that, I got them in 6th. Now, here we are at another big jump I'm predicting from 2021 to 2022, and that's LAFC finally getting back into the playoff picture. Last year was rough. Bob Bradley effect started to wear down, and the injury plagued Carlos Vela did not help either. Along with that, I'll just say LAFC's defense had some questionable decisions at times. Now the team has sold on maybe one of their best players this offseason, with Atuesta heading to Brazil, but they've brought in USMNT midfielder Kellen Acosta in a big interleague trade. As well with that, they found their solution in the goalkeeping position with Maxime Crépeau, who we mentioned had a 75% save percentage in Vancouver last season. The big criticism of LA though during this offseason was the appointment of Steve Cherundolo, who managed the USL's Las Vegas Lights to a 6-23-3 record. Yeah, that's not too good, but Cherundolo's been backed by the club and he's hoping to continue LAFC's mantra of high energy attacking football. The big switch for LA last year was the introduction of Arango during the summer. After coming in, Arango kind of popped off with 14 goals in 17 appearances. With a full season with Arango and hopefully a revitalized Carlos Vela, I expect that number to grow significantly and propel this team up the table. Heading into the top four, like the East, everything is so marginal between these teams. For Sporting Kansas City, this team has been really consistent over the last couple of years. Last year they had the second most goals in the league and also had a really tight defense. What I find interesting about this team is that they managed to score 58 goals with their DP striker Alan Pulido out for almost half of the year. And it's a good thing they showed that capability, because for this year, Pulido's been ruled out for the entire season, which is really rough. Just recently, the club went out and got Nikolai Vujinic on loan from a club in Serbia as the replacement. Vujinic had 10 goals in his 22 appearances last year in the Serbian First Division, but this obviously won't be a like-for-like swap. As for their other goal scorers, as much as I'd love to think Daniel Shalaway will recreate his 16 goals and 8 assists from last season, his history in MLS doesn't back that type of consistency. Johnny Russell, who carried similar stats to Shalaway, has a bit more of that consistency in his yearly performances, but he's 1 year older now. For the backline, SKC has spent $2 million on a center back from the top flight in Slovenia to further their defensive capabilities. They've also brought in a winger for some good cash, but his stats don't excite me too much. I could see SKC fighting for the top spot, but I'm going to put them in 4th place. For the MLS Cup runners-up, I'm putting Portland down in 3rd place. Like SKC in 2021, Portland was a team who was very high on the scoring chart, sitting in 3rd overall in the league. But what they lacked was on the defensive side, which was surprising considering they had one of the best controlling midfields in the league, led by the ageless wonder Diego Chara. This season too, the Timbers have added 19-year-old Ayala from Estudiantes for $3.5 million. Now, I don't think Portland's problems came from the goalkeeper Steve Clark, and I actually think he was a very solid keeper for this team, which makes me wonder why they declined his contract come the end of the year. So now the team has brought in a few potential keepers who will have to battle it out for the starting position. On the attack, Portland has many options. If Darian Asprilla can hold his form from 2021, he will always be dangerous, and Felipe Mora filled his role really well last season, supplying 11 goals and 5 assists. The Timbers will be looking out for a bit more production from Santiago Morena, with a full year incoming for the Colombian. The concern I had last year and follows into this year though is the question of the age of this squad. Last year, 33-year-old Sebastian Blanco drastically improved this team when he was on the field, but with his injury problems, I don't know if you can always rely on that. Also, the combined age of their center back, Supric and Mabiala, is at 63, so that could be an issue. I won't mention the 35-year-old Diego Chara in this conversation though, because that man will never stop covering ground. This next one is a possible long shot, but it's one that I can actually see happening. Nashville SC are coming over into the Western Conference for their 3rd year in the league. In the East, Nashville has shown that they have the ability to compete at a really high level. With the roster built from MLS experience and some foreign talent, I'm really impressed with what Nashville has done since joining the league. But when they're switching conferences, playing teams that they may have never even played before, there's no real basis on what this team will do. Because of that, I'm sticking with what I do know. Nashville is a great defensive unit led by my favorite, Walker Zimmerman. This team was tied for the least amount of goals conceded last year with 33 in 34 games. This team also held an unbeaten record at Nissan Stadium, but this year they'll be playing in their brand new stadium. As well as being defensively sound, last year Nashville showed that they can attack too. DP Hani Mukhtar led the league in goal contributions and racked up 19 goals and 8 assists in the regular season. This year we'll also see the emergence of DP Ake Loba, who, judging by his preseason, will be ready right off the bat. Now, the downfall for Nashville could be their geographical location and conference alignment. Every away trip to a conference opponent will be a long one, and actually the closest conference opponent in SKC is still further from Nashville than they are to multiple Eastern Conference teams. I'm not expecting that to hurt them too much, but I could be downplaying it. So I think Nashville has the ability to finish second in the West, but I guess we'll wait and see. And finally, in the top spot in the West, you probably already guessed it, I have the Seattle Sounders. Last season, this Seattle team rarely had their full strength side on the field. With Jordan Morris out, Ladero out, Fry out for some time too, this team managed to use their depth and fight for every point. They even went down to Austin, played a lineup with teenagers, and came out with a win. So you add in everyone from João Paulo, both Rodons, Rui Diaz, Nuhu, and everyone else, I can't see anyone beating this team. Especially after their failure in the postseason in 2021, Seattle will not take their foot off the gas. Over the offseason too, this team has added pieces to make them better. I mean, they literally stole RSL's DP and added them to their already bolstered roster. Along with that, I'll never leave them out of the MLS Cup debate. So with all my predictions in place, let me hear what you're predicting for 2022. It's not easy to take a look at 28 separate teams and evaluate them, so I hope you guys took the time to check out what I had to say, and maybe you'll stick around for the rest of the season. I have all sorts of content I'm looking to do this year, and this is just the start. Thanks for watching, and I will see you.